All right, go ahead and turn to page 319 in your workbook. And the first thing I want to do is just kind of refresh our memory of what we did from lesson 5. So when we looked at lesson 5, we had to come up with our rate of change. Well, rate of change is change in y over change in x. That's y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. That's the same thing as m, or slope. Okay? So we talked about it a couple ways yesterday. First, remember, rate of change, you can look at it as how are these changing each time. And the same thing this way. The other thing that we did is we said you can do y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. That would just be like pick 2 points. So I usually use the first 2 since that's my smallest numbers. 56 minus 53 over 2 minus 1. And we would get 3 over 1. So in this case, my slope would be 1. The other thing that we worked on finding was our y-intercept yesterday. And that was our b value. So remember, in order to do that, I would pick a point. I, again, go with the first one usually because it's our smallest numbers. I plug in my y and my x. So my y is 53 equals my m we found was 3 and my x is 1 plus b. Remember, that's just doing y equals mx plus b. Y equals mx plus b. I just plugged in what I knew. From there, when I solve, I simplify, I move my constants to one side, and my y-intercept in this case is 50. So for this example, I know that my equation would be y equals 3x plus 50. I know my rate of change is $3 per guest, and I know that my y-intercept, my beginning value, is 50. I can use that equation then to come up for any of these numbers. Let's say I wanted for 10 guests. I would do 3 times 10, that's 30, plus 50 is 80, so I know it would cost $80 for 10 guests. So that's just kind of a quick review of what we did in lesson 5. For lesson 6 today, go ahead and flip the page, so page 320. It's kind of the same thing, except today, when we say initial value, what we really mean is our y-intercept. Because the initial value of a function is the corresponding y value when x is equal to 0. Remember, our y-intercepts means x equals 0. It says you can find the initial value of a function from graphs, words, or tables. So today is pretty much the same thing as yesterday, except instead of saying we're finding y-intercept, we're finding initial value. Mean the same thing, just 2 different ways of saying it. So the first one says, a shoe store offers free points when you sign up for their rewards card. Then for each pair of shoes purchased, you earn an additional number of points. The graph shows the total points earned for several pairs of shoes. Find and interpret the rate of change and initial value. So first thing we're going to do is find our rate of change. That's my change in y over change in x. So I'm just going to pick 2 points, doesn't matter what 2. So maybe you want the second 2, maybe you want the first 2, doesn't really matter. Remember, these are my y's, these are my x's. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to look, my y2, my second point, is at 120. My y1 is at 90. So 120 minus 90. And then my x's, my x2 is at 6. My x1 was at 4. And I'm going to go ahead and simplify. So 120 minus 90, that's 30. And 6 minus 4, that's 2. When I simplify, that gives me 15. Now I want to make sure I know what I'm talking about here. So I look at, what is my y over x talking about? Well, it's 15 points per pair of shoes. So 15 points per pair of shoes. That means every shoe I buy, or pair of shoes that I buy, I get 15 more points for my rewards card. The next thing we need to find is our initial value. The initial value is just our b, or our y-intercept. So I go ahead and pick one of my points. It doesn't matter which one. I could be one that I've already used. It could be a new one. So I'm just going to pick this one. And I plug in what I know to y equals mx plus b. So in this case, my y is 60. We already found my m. That was my rate of change. That's 15 points per pair of shoes. And my x, well, at that point, my x is 2. So I go ahead and simplify. 15 times 2 is 30. I subtract 30 on both sides, and I find that my b value is equal to 30. What that means here is when we start, if I buy 0 pairs of shoes, my initial value is 30 points. Even if I haven't bought any shoes, I already have 30 points just for signing up for my rewards card. So I sign up, I get 30 free points, then every time I buy shoes, I get 15 points for every pair of shoes. So make sure when you do this, you are interpreting them like I just did. Really, by interpreting it, it means make sure you're adding on your labels. So 30 points is the initial value. My rate of change is 15 points per pair of shoes. Let's go ahead and look at our Got It problem. So Got It says Music Inc. charges a yearly subscription fee plus a monthly fee. The total cost for different numbers of months, including the yearly fee, is shown in the graph. Find and interpret the rate of change and initial value. So we're going to start off by just finding our rate of change. Remember, that's our change in y over change in x. So I'm going to give you a second and find that. So there's multiple ways to find our rate of change, or our slope. I'm just going to pick 2 points. So I'm going to pick the first 2 and do my y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1, and I end up finding that it is 3 over 1. Since it's a straight line, we know that no matter which 2 points you picked, you're going to get 3 over 1, which is $3 per month. If you look at your y and x labels, $3 per month. Then my initial fee. My initial value, or my initial fee, is going to be my b value. So I pick a point. I'm just going to use the first one and plug in what I know. Go ahead, and I want you to find your b value right now. So with that first point, I plugged in my y, I plugged in my m, I plugged in my x, and I solved. So in this case, 12 means before any number of months, I have to pay a $12 yearly subscription. So my initial value is $12. Then after that, the rate of change is $3 per month. That's why the first month cost me $15, because it's $12 plus that $3 for the first month. Then it's $3 additional every other month. Okay? Next example says, Joan has some photos in her photo album. Each week she plans to add 12 photos. Joan has 120 photos after 8 weeks. Assume the relationship is linear. Remember, that means it's a straight line, so there is a constant rate of change. Find and interpret the rate of change and the initial value. This one tends to confuse people because it actually gave us some of the information. Notice it says each week she plans to add 12 photos. So in this case, my rate of change is 12 photos each week. 12 photos per week. Okay, that is my rate of change in this case. So then I just have to find my B value. Since they already told me my rate of change, I need to do my initial value. Remember, initial value, that's my y-intercept, or my B. So I plug in what I know. And if you look at this and you think, but how am I supposed to know which one is my y and which one is my x? Well, this rate of change tells us 12 photos per week. That means my photos is my y, and my weeks is my x. So I'm going to plug those in. Y equals m x plus b. And I solve. So I have 120 equals, and 12 times 8, let's see, that's 96. I subtract 96 on both sides, and when I do, I get B is equal to 24. So my initial value is 24 photos. That means when it said Joan has some photos in her photo album, she starts with 24 photos. Then she adds 12 photos per week. That's our interpretation of our rate of change and our initial value. Let's look at the got it. It says, a zoo charges a rental fee of $2 per hour for strollers. The total cost of 5 hours is $13. Assume the relationship is linear. So there is a constant rate of change. The rate of change is the same throughout. Find and interpret the rate of change and initial value. So first thing I want you to do is just tell me what your rate of change is. What is my change in y over change in x? Hopefully you found that this was really easy. My change in y is $2 per hour. It told me that, gave it right to me in the problem. So that is my rate of change, $2 per hour. The next part is we have to find our initial value. Go ahead and use the information that they gave you to plug in what you know and solve for your B value. So go ahead and do that. Once again, when you look at it, if you're not sure which one is your y and your x, use your rate of change. My y is on top, so that's my dollars. So this one is my y. That means hours. This one is my x. Some people think it's always got to be the first one is y, the second one is x. Notice it was different on these. Here first one was y, here first one is x. It's all how they write the problem. So make sure you're being careful on that. So it's 13 is equal to my m, or my rate of change, 2 times my x value of 5 plus b. Let's go ahead and simplify. I have to solve, and I get b is equal to 3. So I know that in this case what we're talking about is the initial fee is $3. That means that's $3 to rent the stroller, and then it's $2 per hour for the stroller. So just to get the stroller is $3. then after that, it's $2 for every hour that I keep the stroller. So make sure you are interpreting it. Again, that's what I'm doing by putting these labels on. So you have to add that little bit of information of what are we talking about. It's kind of like anytime we have a story problem, you have to explain what this number means. That's all you're doing in this interpretation. So example 3 says, the table shows how much money Ava saved, or has saved. Assume the relationship between the two quantities is linear. Once again, constant rate of change. Find and interpret the rate of change in initial value. So once again, we have to find our rate of change. We talked about a couple different ways to do that. In the past, we've said you can find your rate of change by doing change in y over change in x on the outside. You can do your y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. Since in the last lesson we were practicing that, that's what I'm going to do. y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. And when I do that, I end up getting, let's see, 20 over 1. So that means it's $20 per month is my rate of change. And again, I got that from here with my labels, $20 per month, because it's y over x as we're doing this. Then to find the initial value, we pick a set of points. I'm just going to go with the first one and plug them in. Here I have y, here I have m, here I have x, and I'm looking for my b value. I go to solve. So I simplify by multiplying. I subtract my constant on both sides, and I end up with b is equal to 50. So in this case, what it's telling me is Ava had $50 saved to begin with. Then Ava saved an additional $20 per month. Again, don't forget to do the interpretation. Tell me what these two numbers mean at the end. We're on to our last one. So here is our last got it. It says the table shows the monthly cost of sending text messages. Assume the relationship between the two quantities is linear. So there is a constant rate of change. Find and interpret the rate of change and the initial value. So there's multiple ways you can find your rate of change. Go ahead and find it whichever way you prefer best. When you go to do your rate of change on this one, I'm going to do y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. And when I do that, I end up getting 0.1 over 1. Anytime it's over 1, it's really just that number. And so we're going to write that as money because it's talking about cost per messages. So 0.1 is really 10 cents. Money always has 2 decimal places per message. So it's 10 cents per message that we send. Now it wants you to go ahead and find your initial value. So go ahead and do that. With my initial value, I pick a point and I plug in what I know. So I have 10.50 equals my m value that we just found, that's that 0.1. If you want to put the extra 0 at the end, you can, but you don't have to because we don't have to write it as money when we write it into the equation. Our x plus b. So when I do that, I have 10.5 is equal to, I simplify, and that's 0.5 plus b. To solve, I'll move my constant to the same side. So 10.5 minus 0.5 gives me b is equal to 10. So that initial fee is talking about, remember, that's when my x value is 0. So in this case, if x is 0, so if I don't send any messages, it's still going to cost me $10. So if you're still struggling with finding your label when you're looking for your initial value, think what we said about what initial value means. So let's see, initial value, remember, is when x is equal to 0, because that explains our y-intercepts. Okay? When we look at where things cross the y-axis here, if it's a point on the y-axis, that means our x value is 0. So if we send 0 messages, it's going to be $10. Once again, since it's saying interpret, you have to say what these mean. It's a $10 initial cost or initial fee, and then it's 10 cents per message after that. Okay? And you might want to make sure you're labeling which one is which. So this is obviously my rate of change, and this one is my initial cost, okay, or my initial value. So hopefully you found that as a really easy lesson, because it was a lot of repeat from lesson 5. If you have questions, make sure that you are asking.